Today on Time 100 Talks, we'll discuss the latest updates in the global battle against COVID-19. We'll speak with entertainment leaders on how the pandemic is affecting their work and the impact it's having on their lives and the world around them. Today's guests include physician and professor of public health Dr. Leana Wen, actress and Unicef Goodwill Ambassador Priyanka Chopra Jonas, who'll be joined by Unicef Executive Director Henrietta Fore, and musical artist Davido will join us from Nigeria. Today is Thursday, November 19th, 2020. This is Time 100 Talks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Edward Felsenthal, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Time, and welcome back to another great edition of Time 100 Talks. The past week has seen incredible advances in bringing vaccines for COVID-19 closer to reality, but it will be at least a few months before they're ready for widespread distribution. And in the meantime, the virus is very much on the rise, and many hospitals and healthcare workers are at the brink. That's the subject of this week's edition of Time Magazine, the COVID Winter, and it's also the subject of our first conversation today on Time 100 Talks. Dr. Leana Wen is with us to discuss the latest updates on the virus and what the next presidential administration should make a top priority to mitigate the virus. Dr. Wen is joined by our senior health correspondent, Alice Park. Alice?
Hi, I'm Alice Park, senior health correspondent for Time, and I'm joined by former health commissioner for the city of Baltimore and now visiting professor at George Washington University School of Public Health, Dr. Leana Wen. Dr. Wen, welcome to Time 100 Talks.
Of course, glad to join you again, Alice.
So we're now in a very unique position where we're going to have a change in leadership in the country in the middle of a pandemic. So any transition can obviously hit bumps. What are you most worried about when you look at how the public health response might be affected by the shift in administrations?
So we've seen already that President Trump has essentially surrendered this response. There are so many steps that could have been taken that his administration simply did not. Now, here's what my concern is with the incoming Biden administration. I think President-elect Biden has already laid out a very good plan that's based on evidence. He has enlisted top public health experts and has made it clear that he's going to be listening to them, that public health is finally going to be driving this public health crisis. The problem is that of trust. You can have the best policy in the world, but if people are not following it, then it's not going to do much good. And if Biden were in office this entire time and we did not have many months of misleading information, then we would be in a different place. But now our country is so polarized, so divided, that I think Biden and his team will have this Herculean task, not just of delivering on the policies and implementing them, which I'm confident that they'll do, but actually in getting people to follow this guidance. And so for that, I hope that President-elect Biden will reach out to not only doctors and public health officials, which again, I'm glad that he's doing that, but I hope that he will specifically also reach out to 3 additional groups. First, to economists, to make it clear that the economy and public health are not at odds with each other, but actually they need to work hand in hand. Second, to prominent Republicans. And third, to pastors and religious leaders. A core principle in public health is that the best messenger may not always be yourself. That you have to find the most trusted messenger to the people that you're trying to reach. And to many Americans, Democrats and doctors are not the most trusted messengers. We need to find other people who can really help to turn this pandemic around.
And you pointed out that it's really then essentially a communications problem as much as it is, right, a public health and a science problem. If that's the case, what do you think should be the Biden administration's #1 priority when they hit office in January for addressing COVID-19?
We have a serious issue with credibility in this country because so much of that public trust has been eroded. And we know that public health depends on public trust. In public health, we're asking people in this pandemic, as an example, to do things that are just different and uncomfortable at the best, in the best way of describing it. I mean, for a lot of people, it just may be nearly impossible. I mean, we're asking people to potentially forego their wages. We're asking people to stay quarantined for 14 days if they're exposed and not even see their immediate family. We're asking people to go through a lot of hardships. And we know that people are not going to follow this guidance and have not been following this guidance in part because of mixed messaging and because that trust has been eroded. And so I think that it is a matter of messaging, yes, but it's also a matter of proving trustworthiness in order to be trusted. And so to that effect, not only should the incoming Biden team be enlisting trusted messengers, as I've discussed, but they also have to very quickly deliver on their promises. There's going to be a narrow window for them to act.
So let's take an example of, a real challenge that the Biden administration will face almost from day one, which is now we've had some good news recently about two vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines that are more than 90% effective. But these vaccines were developed and tested under the Trump administration. And I've seen surveys where people have expressed a lot of misgivings and concerns and mistrust about the vaccine and not really believing in the results and not really believing in the scientific process. How would you advise the incoming Biden team about how to address that specifically, like the vaccine question specifically?
So there are three groups that are distrustful of vaccines. There is a group that for a long time have been vaccine skeptics. They may be anti-science. I don't think that that's the group that one needs to reach immediately. This is going to be the hardest group. There's a second group, and that's individuals who, for good reason, are distrustful of the medical and scientific community. These are communities of color, for example, that have in the past been unethically and illegally experimented on. And the last thing that we would want to do with this group, by the way, is to say, you should be participating in vaccine trials, but they're then not getting the vaccine first, because that then furthers this perception that we're experimenting on Black and brown bodies. And so there needs to be active outreach to these communities. There also needs to be prioritization of these communities to get the vaccine first, because they are the individuals disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Then I think you have another group too, and those are individuals who are newly distrustful. These are individuals who are concerned about politics and partisanship taking precedence over science when it comes to approval of the vaccine. And I think for that, you need to let the scientists lead. It needs to be made clear that there are many safeguards, that no shortcuts are going to be followed in the vaccine process. But just to speak on this too, Alice, not only am I concerned about the public education, I'm concerned about the actual distribution, because vaccine approval is really only the first step. It is a very complex process to figure out how to store, manufacture, distribute hundreds of millions of doses of the vaccine. Both of the vaccines that have shown promise thus far, the Pfizer vaccine, Moderna vaccine required 2 doses. That's an additional challenge. And just being able to coordinate with all the local state entities, private companies for that distribution will be a really remarkable challenge. We've already had Operation Warp Speed for the development. Now we need Operation Warp Speed for distribution.
You've been a health commissioner for the city of Baltimore. How confident are you that cities, states are ready and prepared and have what they need to pull off a vaccination program of this scale?
I'm not at all confident. And that's because I've been speaking to local and state health officials who have all expressed serious concern about this. If we're talking, for example, about the Pfizer vaccine that requires a storage that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit colder than any vaccine that we've ever had, I mean, that's a major logistics challenge in and of itself. What happens then if we have 2 vaccines? People will have a lot of questions about who has access to which vaccines. There needs to be a central coordination also of which entities have which vaccines. For example, maybe it makes sense for big cities to have the Pfizer vaccine that requires a much lower temperature storage and special freezers. Maybe rural areas should get the Moderna vaccine that has a much greater latitude when it comes to storage. I mean, these are really complex questions. We also don't want to exacerbate health disparities. You don't want to make it that the people who have means are able to get the vaccine in their doctor's offices, but those who are actually the most vulnerable, who are essential workers, frontline workers, are not able to get the vaccine because they are relying on the public health safety net. I also worry about the trade-offs that may have to take place. The last thing that we would want is for childhood immunizations, measles, mumps, rubella, et cetera, to be put off because those are the same places that would be delivering the COVID vaccine that now have to delay other vaccines instead. And I also worry about the supply chain. We need to make sure that there are vials and syringes and the individuals, the healthcare workers who are able to do this too. While we're in the midst of this COVID storm, that's also taking up the resources in our healthcare system. So I'm worried about a lot of these pieces. And again, I am confident, at least I'm very hopeful that the incoming Biden team will be able to overcome these challenges. But just to say that it's not going to be done overnight, and it is a huge logistics challenge all around.
And even once we get a vaccine that's authorized by the FDA, and once people get the shots, and we've just discussed that those are two very big ifs still, can people be confident that once they got the shot, they are quote unquote immune to COVID-19?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I don't think we can say that. We just received news from Moderna that their vaccine is nearly 95% effective in these early part of their phase 3 trials. But we don't know if that's going to continue to be the case when over a bigger size population. We also don't know what happens with specific populations, for example, with older individuals, with those who are immunosuppressed, with children whom this vaccine has not yet been tested on. So first of all, we don't know how effective this vaccine is really going to be. But then even if it's 90% effective, which would be amazing, there's still a 10% chance that you could get COVID-19. And so we still do need to keep up with our precautions in some way. As in, for the foreseeable future, we will still have to wear masks. We still have to abide by good hand hygiene. We still have to keep up some degree of physical distancing. It's going to take months, if ever, that we can get to the point of herd immunity when enough people in the population have been vaccinated that we can essentially consider COVID-19 to be eradicated. But we are quite a few months from that happening, if at all. Although I will say that the months that we have ahead of us, the 1 to 2 months ahead of us, are extremely deadly. And we should be doing everything we can to reduce risk during that period of time. We can still see our loved ones next winter, but not if we don't survive this winter.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because we are heading right now. The reality is that we now have rising number of cases in the United States. We're heading into flu season, and we've got potentially both the coronavirus and influenza circulating at the same time in many parts of the country. And we're about to hit the holiday travel season when people want to get together with their loved ones, of course. What advice do you have for families who really are trying to navigate these new risks and figure out whether it makes sense to get together? And if they do, how should they do that?
I would give a blanket statement, and I know this is not something we would want to be hearing, but my blanket statement is that people should not be gathering indoors at all, except with people who are in their immediate household that they live with. And that's because we have COVID-19 surging all across the country. Essentially, the entire United States is a COVID hotspot. We're breaking new records every day and then shattering them the next day. I mean, we could soon reach 200,000 new infections every day. Our hospitals are already overwhelmed, and we know that hospitalizations lag infections by a couple of weeks. I mean, it is just not safe with this level of virus to get together with people indoors right now. And so there are ways to see our loved ones. Of course, in addition to seeing them through Zoom or virtual meetings, we can see our loved ones outdoors with households spaced at least 6 feet apart, not sharing food or drink, and not getting together indoors in any way. If there's inclement weather, we should be canceling those get-togethers or rescheduling them. If people really want to get together indoors, there is a way to do that safely, which is everybody should quarantine for 14 days, meaning limit their risks in every way. Kids maybe not even going to daycare and school, and people definitely not going to indoor bars and restaurants and gyms and seeing other people in indoor settings. If you quarantine for 14 days and then get tested, it is safe to then see your loved ones. But that is something that's impractical for most people, and especially because many people are still working at this time. And if we're only seeing one another for a short period of time, that 14-day quarantine may be impractical. If that's the case, then we just really need to refrain from seeing one another this holiday season. A vaccine is on its way. There are better therapies on its way too. Almost certainly we will have a very different summer of 2021. But the best thing that we can do for our loved ones right now is to not see them in person, to hold off until the summer. Let's celebrate Thanksgiving in July.
And speaking of difficult decisions we're going to be making in order to get ourselves to the other side of this pandemic, do you foresee mandates for the vaccine, whether it's, cities making mandates or schools or workplaces? Do you see people being asked to get vaccinated before they come to work, go to school, et cetera?
I mean, there is precedent for this. We require healthcare workers to receive the flu vaccine to treat patients. We require children to get immunizations to attend school. And so at some point, I would anticipate, especially if there is an effective and safe vaccine, I would anticipate that there are requirements for vaccinations. I think it's too soon to do this, especially because in the beginning, we don't even have enough vaccine. The question isn't about requiring everyone. It's actually how do we literally distribute vaccines to people? How do we convince them to take it? And so I think we're a long way off from that. Also, we are not even doing the vaccine trials in children yet. I believe Pfizer actually is starting them, but only in children 12 and older. So we're a pretty long way off from those blanket requirements.
And when you look at the next year that we're facing, and you talked about potentially a very different summer in 2021, are you optimistic that by summer, let's say, we will be seeing the other side of this pandemic?
I hope so. I think if it's anything that we've learned during COVID-19, it's that we need to be humble about our predictions. A lot of people thought that we would get a respite over the summer, but we didn't. We actually saw a major surge across the South, the Southwest, the Sunbelt area, California. We did not see that quiescent period as we had hoped. And I hope that things will go as in the most optimistic of our projections, which is that we will have a very difficult few months ahead of us. But then ideally, we will have the vaccine available, distributed to people in the spring, such that by summer, we could be in a very different place. We could be seeing the other side of this pandemic. But that also depends on the actions that we all take right now. And I think if it's anything to convey, it's that the future here is not inevitable. We are projecting maybe 200,000 more deaths in the US in the next couple of months. We're projecting 2,000, maybe more deaths per day in the month coming up. But that doesn't have to be the case. We can all wear masks when we're in public places, and I cannot emphasize this enough. We can restrict being in indoor spaces. And in the absence of federal action that's so needed right now, even in the absence of local and state action, we as individuals can still do our part.
Well, I think that's a good message to end on, to remember that really the power to end this pandemic really lies with all of us. Dr. Wen, thank you so much for joining us on Time 100 Talks.
Of course, always glad to join you, Alice. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome back to Time 100 Talks. I'm Alice Park, Senior Health Correspondent for Time, and I'm now joined by Unicef Executive Director Henrietta Fore and actress, producer, and Unicef Goodwill Ambassador Priyanka Chopra Jonas. Henrietta and Priyanka, welcome to Time 100 Talks.
Thank you so much, Alice. So nice to be here.
It is indeed. Thank you, Alice.
Priyanka, I want to start with you. You've been a Unicef Goodwill Ambassador since 2016 and have traveled around the world meeting children and hearing directly from them about their challenges. I'd like to start by asking, from those conversations, what has stood out to you as far as things that children have said that are important to them and that we as adults are not really addressing to their satisfaction?
I think it's amazing that the children around the world have such a strong opinion on what is happening to the world, because eventually they're the ones who are going to inherit it from us. And I've been working with UNICEF since 2016, but I was a national ambassador for UNICEF in India as well for almost a decade. And having worked with children in a country, that has so many crises in general, and then having gone to travel to refugee camps and having traveled around the world and met children, I think the one thing all of them really, really implore upon is an education, no matter what their circumstances are, even if they are in refugee camps where they don't even have access to formal education or papers, the one thing that they want is their right to an education. And also I've had innumerable conversations with children who are so impacted by the climate crisis, and I think we as adults are not really taking it as seriously as we should. The climate crisis and the world in as it is going to be inherited by them, and they have a very, very strong opinion about it. And they talk very, very clearly about the fact that this world needs to be protected and saved for them. And I, in fact, recently just had a conversation with a 16-year-old advocate from India, who has been working on getting rid of single-use plastics like straws, etc., within the country, and has managed to, within his own community, get rid of about 26 million straws in just 2 years. And he had, he was so inspiring to me because he said, I'm 16 years old. When all of you guys are gone, that's going to be my prime. And what is the world that you're leaving behind for me? And hearing it from kids is just so incredible, because they have a perspective that I guess we don't hear as much, or at least countries around the world don't hear as much.
When I'm traveling, I also hear about education. And what they say is, I want a modern education. I don't necessarily want the education that you all have had. I want something that looks forward. So I need foundational skills, but I need entrepreneurial skills. I may have to create a job for myself. And I want some skills that are occupational, and I need digital skills. And I need it now because there are a lot of jobs that are just disappearing, and I'm not sure that they're going to be jobs there for me. So to Priyanka's thought, I think young people are asking a lot of us that we've just got to listen to and then see if we can't help them and create that sort of a world and that legacy for them.
Speaking of that legacy, Henrietta, UNICEF is coming up on its 75th anniversary next year. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the original goals and mission of UNICEF when it was founded, and how have those priorities evolved over the years? Are the urgent needs that you're seeing still essentially the same? Are they changing? How have things changed since UNICEF was founded?
Well, in a way, childhood has changed, Alice. So 75 years ago, the world was just coming out of war, and there were so many children that had lost their parents, their homes, their communities, and they needed to rebuild their lives, and we needed to help rebuild their lives. And if you fast forward now 75 years later, our technologies and tools are very modern and sophisticated in comparison, but a child's heart and needs are often very much the same. So we are doing many of the same things, focusing on nutrition and health and education and water and sanitation and protection. And yet we're doing lots of new modern things, thinking about artificial intelligence for children that are differently abled. And it's a remarkable world out there. Priyanka mentioned who she spoke to for World Children's Day, and I spoke to a girl who is a young scientist. She's 14, and she's developed a novel way of combating the COVID virus. Well, they're a remarkable generation, and we just have to help them, open up opportunities for them.
And just to add to Henrietta ma'am's point, like seeing children in countries, developing worlds where they don't even have access to Wi-Fi at the moment. So with the pandemic happening and so many kids being taken out of school, and their education depending on Wi-Fi or even cell phones, which, poor children around the world don't have access to. Now, these children, when they anyway have these problems in a normal world. Now you add the pandemic to it. Most of these kids are probably not going to return, specifically the girls. They're probably not going to be able to come back to school. They're going to have issues such as child marriage, child labor that'll come into play. And, a lot of like sexual violence against girls is on a rise because with the restrictions and these girls not having the freedom and the safety to go to school, they're in their homes most of the times with their violators. So there are so many issues that it's so exciting for me to see the kind of work that UNICEF has done and continues to do when it comes to children, their health, their general life. That it takes my heart, it gives my heart so much joy to hear the executive directors say that right now, that this is an extraordinary generation of children, but there is an extraordinary crisis against them too. There are so many children who are in refugee camps living under the poverty line, and especially with the pandemic right now, we've seen such a rise in poverty. About 140 million people will fall into household poverty right now. And these are kids, which is a completely lost generation. And it's so important for us to realize and recognize that these children will have an impact on what the world will look like. And the decisions we take right now will impact them the most.
And it seems for both of you, you've touched on this a bit, but I wanted to delve a little bit deeper. It seems that the pandemic has only highlighted, right, and put into starker relief the wide range of challenges that young people face around the world. But sometimes crisis can bring action. So in your view, has the pandemic helped to bring more attention to some of these areas and allowed countries to address them more effectively? Have you seen that? I'd love to hear from both of you from your own experience there.
So let me begin on that, because we have seen a renewed urgency and commitment from a number of countries. And it usually centers around education. And it's to Priyanka's point. Often there are children in their countries, maybe half or more, who do not have connectivity. So when the schools closed and the teachers were no longer there, children's learning simply stopped. There was not enough thought given to remote or distance learning, whether it's by radio or television or an SMS on your cell phone or a tablet or the internet. And if it is a lower or middle income country, it's often that the teachers themselves did not have access to any of those capabilities. So governments are now relooking at their budgets. Some have had a stay in interest payments on debt, and they're thinking about how to invest for the future. And of course, children are a great investment, and education is probably the best ladder out of poverty. So investing in connecting every school to the internet in the world and every learner and every teacher is starting to pick up a lot of interest around the world. And we think it can mean that our world can emerge from COVID stronger and more forward thinking and future thinking, and with a much more equal playing field for children. But this is one area that I think it's a once in a generation opportunity. This could be a big leap forward for the world.
And I'd just love to add to that. I mean, it's just a simple statistic that I think about. I understand that the governments have to look out for the economies of the countries, but when you can have bars and restaurants open, we can safely figure out a way to get children back to school. And I was so excited about hearing that UNICEF is actually imploring governments to reopen schools in a safe way by having smaller classrooms or by staggering timings in which children can come to school. But I mean, if we have the ability to go to a restaurant, we have to be able to prioritize, and understand what the priorities should be. And an entire generation of children not being able to get an education for a really long time is a big priority.
What lessons can we learn, do you think, from young people about tackling a big issue like climate change, like how to get people, students back into school during a pandemic? Have you seen examples of children really leading the way here where we can learn some lessons from them, and hopefully countries and governments can do the same?
Well, Priyanka's comment about climate change, I think, is perfectly on. Uh, Young people care about this issue so much, and they want to roll up their sleeves and do something about it. So one of the areas that UNICEF works very hard on is water and sanitation. It is important to be able to have running water and a bar of soap so that you can wash your hands in the time of COVID. But it's also important that you have water that you can drink that's clean, that you will not be getting cholera or other diseases. And at school, it's really important that there be a bathroom, and a bathroom particularly set aside for girls who are adolescent, so that there is hygiene, water, and sanitation that is surrounding every child as an ecosystem. Water means our planet. It means climate change. They want to do something practical, pick up straws or bottles in the ocean, or help with water in their communities. So I think part of our challenge is how to make them equal partners so that they can help um, change the world around them, their communities, their schools, their homes, and that we are playing our part as good partners, but it's solutions. It's not just advocacy. And that's at least something that we see very strongly among young people. And Priyanka just spoke to us.
I mean, I have to add to this. In my years of working with UNICEF, the one thing that I have seen is children taking charge of their futures in their own hands. In so many places in the world, I have seen, like especially with UNICEF partnering with in UNICEF India with a lot of communities and creating community centers. The greatest thing about the work that UNICEF does is there's no cookie cutter, ideology. There's no like same kind of solutions for different countries. They align with communities, they align with kids in communities, adolescent kids in communities, and help give them resources to figure out solutions within their own communities. A peer-to-peer program, I've seen so much success with that in so many countries around the world that I've traveled with them with. Girls who, especially when it comes to like not having bathrooms, not having clean water, or advocating education over child marriage. I've seen kids who have turned their parents' opinions and turned their community's opinions and stopped child marriage and made sure that girls are in their own neighborhoods, in their own communities, go to school. They have created entrepreneurships. There was this one girl, Sunita, that I met in India. I love telling her story because she was pulled out of school because both her parents were unwell and she was going to be married off. And she said, no, I don't want to be married off. I can actually help you, with an income. And her mother used to stitch clothes, and she started learning how to stitch while going to school, eventually created a business, bought a sewing machine, bought 3 sewing machines, and eventually created a small business in her village where women were trained and they sold clothes and had a financial return. And this is a 15-year-old girl who created a revolution within her community, and I've seen that around the world so much that it's wonderful to see. And these kids are so passionate about taking charge of their own life. We just have to give them the ability to do it, the empowerment to do it.
And that empowerment is often, it can be financial, it can be social, it can be emotional. How do you prioritize how to, when you see sort of a seed like that, how do you nurture that and grow that so that it does blossom into something that's bigger and that adults start taking notice and they actually learn from the children?
I think for me, specifically being an ambassador for UNICEF, my job is to be a conduit to the world, for the world to be able to see, and for me to showcase stories of children that are not just inspiring to me but to the rest of the world. One of my most amazing trips that I did with UNICEF was to Zimbabwe, and I remember I showcased a lot of stories on my socials and talked about individual girls that I met or kids that I met. And I remember the impact of that. People still ask me about those girls. They're still talking to, and I still stay in touch with them. And it's so wonderful to actually be able, and that's literally my job, is to make sure that they're not forgotten. And I remember one of the trips that I went to, a little girl did ask me, she gave me a bracelet that she had, and this was in Jordan, and it was one of her only prized possessions because she was in a refugee camp from Syria for about 7 years. So she had this bracelet, she gave it to me. And she said, I know you're going to go wherever you're going to go to the world, meet a lot of other children. Don't forget me. And I'll never forget Saba's face when she said that. And, these children, I think when we look around our communities, just as individual people, UNICEF obviously is doing really large work. But as individual people, when you look around your home or when you look around your neighborhood, there's always someone that you can help. Whether that's financially, like you said, whether it's emotionally, whether it's just showing compassion and empathy. The most important thing is to be able to know that no matter how badly off you're in life, someone else is worse off than you. And if each one of us can think about, especially with the children, making sure that we give them an empowerment where they feel like they can achieve and they can be successful and they can be ambitious, I think that's going to be the greatest win for our generation.
Well, Priyanka said it absolutely beautifully. This notion about one child at a time, one individual at a time, is a really important premise. All of us are different. We all have different hopes and dreams and challenges. But if we can look in our own homes and our own communities for children and young people that we can help, it will make the world a better place.
And Henrietta, I'm not sure many people know that how much research UNICEF conducts to better understand the status of children around the world. Can you talk about some of the major research initiatives that you're pursuing and about the data and evidence-based approach that UNICEF takes?
Yes, well, I'm delighted to, because we've got a new research report coming out. It's called Averting a Lost Generation. And the idea is that we want to dispel the myth that children are not being impacted by COVID. And there are a number of areas that are covered, but let me just mention a couple of them. One is on immunizations. When children are young, under the age of 1 or under the age of 5, it's very important to get routine immunizations because there are very preventable childhood diseases. In the last 4 years or so, deaths from measles are up 50%, and we think 2020 is going to be even stronger because parents are a bit worried about going to a neighborhood clinic to give their children a vaccination. And yet, we do not want measles and polio and other diseases that stalk the world and stalk children to gain a foothold, and that more children will die from that. So we try very hard to encourage immunization. UNICEF in the 1980s, early in the 80s, began with a vaccination campaign. And at that time, children, only 20% were vaccinated. A decade later, 80% were vaccinated. It made an enormous difference in child survival and in the health of children. So we want to encourage everyone to see the data, to see what's at stake if immunizations do not take place. So immunization is going to be very important to all of us. We also have some very good data on the education revolution and the education effect of what's happening during COVID-19 on children, how children learn, how much they lose if they are even out of school for 4 weeks at a time. Remedial classes are now going on in many countries so that the children can take their final exams. But we have to be very alert to how learning takes place in our world. And a third one is an area, Alice, that you've done work in, which is mental health. Mental health is now a serious issue, and this generation wants to talk about it. They want to make sure that we know that they are stressed. There's a high level of anxiety. There's lots of consideration of self-harm and even suicide among adolescents in the world. There's also depression and anger. We have to make it okay to talk about mental health and to really help this generation, because it's going to be with us for decades to come. And how it affects children will be in this report and the data that we currently have. But we need much more. And this is a call that evidence-based data will make a difference for all of us as we look to the solutions that we can put in place for young people.
And Priyanka, you created the Priyanka Chopra Foundation for Health and Education to focus on children in India. Can you tell us about what you've been hearing about how the pandemic, how COVID-19 has impacted the children there?
I mean, it's to see what has happened with COVID for people who don't have the luxury to be able to socially distant, people who are living in slums or who are living in refugee camps, or kids who are, within families that, live in extreme poverty. It's such an urgent need right now, especially like the migrant worker crisis, for example, in India, where there was mass migration from as soon as COVID shut down and the lockdown happened, and India was under lockdown for a really long time, mass migrations of people from urban cities going back to their villages happened, but there was no transportation for them. There was not enough transportation, and we weren't equipped, I guess, to be able to handle that. And there were children who didn't have food, people walking for days to be able to reach their villages. And more than COVID-19, they were afraid of hunger. And that was a really, really difficult thing to see, and is still affecting so many people around the world, in developing countries specifically, where poverty is really, really extremely rampant. And we have to make sure that, and UNICEF is doing so much work with them. I know UNICEF India definitely was, and I know UNICEF around the world is doing so much work with children who have been specifically impacted in the poorer communities, where now they get married off at a younger age, they are dealing with malnutrition. The concern is, they don't even get the ability to think about, will we be able to go back to school, because the basic access to water, the basics are just denied to them at the moment. So it's extremely urgent that the world look out for those children.
Is there anything that you see that gives you hope, even when we look at the situation and the status of children now? What gives you hope when you consider where we might be in 5 years or 10 years?
I think there's lots of hope, and part of it is just what Priyanka was saying. It's in the eyes of the young people that you meet. There are so many dreams and exciting opportunities before them, and they're really ready to go. They're ready to take on the world. So when I was in Lebanon, I visited a class of primarily girls who decided that they were going to gather into something called Girls Got IT, or Girls Got It. And they were having so much fun, and they do mentoring with other women who are in jobs, and they are graphic designers. They're using IT in lots of different ways. And the girls are so excited. They're going to change the world. And then in South Africa, there's techno girls, and they have it. This is an exciting generation, Alice. It is one ready to go. We just have to help give them a little platform. And if we can connect every school and every learner to the internet, I think they will be off and running.
And UNICEF is working really hard to make that happen. They're aligning with partners around the world to make sure that connectivity is something that children don't have to worry about. The internet is something that they can access in this new world. And like Henrietta said, the generation right now is kicking and raring to go. When you meet these children who are leaders, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, at 17 or 16, I did not know as much as you do. I didn't have the awareness that you did. And with information being at the palm of their hands with this generation, with the internet, these kids are informing themselves. They are ready to make sure that they change the world for the better, that they make it better than, they leave it better than they found it. And I hear so many kids saying that to me. So I feel like it's such a hopeful time that the planet is going to be inherited by a generation of spirited, amazing children. And I think that's the hope. The hope is, even during a pandemic, when you see so many kids coming out there and helping their communities, their children, their friends. You see so many people during the pandemic also coming out and try to help their own communities. To me, that was an extremely hopeful sign that humanity is not lost yet.
Thank you so much for joining us on Time 100 Talks. It was a pleasure having you both.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you so much, Henrietta.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Priyanka.
Welcome back to Time 100 Talks. I'm Edward Felsenthal, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Time. Up next, we have musical artist Davido, who will discuss what he's doing to achieve reform in both politics and policing in Nigeria, and how music can make a difference during these difficult times. He'll be joined by my colleague, Reza Bruner.
Thank you, Edward. I'm Time staff writer Reza Bruner, and I'm joined today from Nigeria by Davido, one of Afrobeat's biggest stars. Welcome to Time 100 Talks.
Hello, what's up?
So first off, congratulations. You just released your new album, A Better Time, just last week. And
Yes.
I know there were some delays in getting it released, so you must be so excited that it's finally out in the world. You were also back in tour in the spring, and that all got canceled because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, how have current events really been affecting your music plans and your career lately?
I mean, like I always said, it's like the best part of being an artist for me is being able to perform, you know what I'm saying? Perform live shows, go on tour, just being active, because I just like being active. Since I've been a kid, I just like to be active. So for all that to just stop, it was crazy. I was on tour. We had about 26 sold out shows. We had like 20 left to finish. And then we just had to stop the tour and I had to come back home.
Yeah.
So how this album came about is I couldn't really go nowhere. We was on lockdown. You know what I'm saying? There was no clubs open, no restaurants. All I could do was really just be in the studio and record. So, you know, that's really how, you know, the album came about. So, I mean, the negative side to it, obviously, you know, I can't perform, you know what I'm saying, can't travel, explore, spread the music. But I say a little positive, the positive side to it is that, you know, I could focus because I couldn't go nowhere but to be in the studio. So that's all I was doing.
Yeah.
Was just recording. So I think, yeah, it helped me focus a little bit, I'd say.
Absolutely. And so one of the hit songs off this album, Femme, has taken on a kind of life of its own as a protest anthem for the NSAS movement. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Nigeria with NSARS, in which residents and the police force have been clashing. You know, why is this happening right now?
I want to say it's happening right now. It's something that has been happening over time. You know, since independence, we've had this problem. But like I say, I always say this, the youths are getting older. People are getting wiser. You know what I'm saying? The old people are getting older. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, people are just tired of it. People need change. We've seen change happen around us. We have neighboring countries like Ghana, you know, countries like Senegal that have progressed. And Nigeria is like the country with the most natural resources in Africa. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, police are underpaid. There are no jobs. You know, everything is just messed up. And we, you know, the electoral system is messed up. So it's more than police brutality. It's a lot of things that people are tired of. But, you know, with the NSAS, it was just too much killing from police, just killing innocent bystanders, killing innocent people. And then with that thing happening at the toll gates, the massacre at the toll gates as well. So everybody was just tired, you know. With the song, I actually made the song months before like there was any like lit uprising or any protest. So it was something like, it was just, I just dropped it at the right time. It wasn't a song I had made for that particular cause.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but femme means roughly be quiet. Why do you think this...
Femme like femme la bouche, like femme.
Okay, cool. So why do you think this song particularly became something that resonated with protesters? And did you ever think that your music, which you've been putting out for a decade now, would become somewhat political like this?
To be honest, like I'm not really political with my music because just not my thing to indulge in. Like if I'm political, I'm speaking politically. I'm doing music. I'm doing my music separately. It just happened that way. Like the song wasn't about, like I said, it wasn't about the protest. But people are just tired of hearing these people talk. So saying femme is just really saying, we're tired of all this talk. You've been talking all these years. Keep quiet. You know what I'm saying? So I guess.
Yeah. So you were born in the U.S. in Atlanta, and I know you've lived in, I think, Alabama, London, and Nigeria as well. All of these places are experiencing major political upheavals this year, especially Atlanta and Lagos. So as an artist, you know, how do you feel about your connection to those two places Do you see any parallels between what's going on in the US and what's going on in Nigeria right now?
I mean, Nigeria, the problem is deep, and you know what I'm saying. Like I explained before,
Yeah.
it's more than end police brutality. It's a lot of other things that are going on in the country, if not everything that's going on in the country that we're not happy about. Nigeria is where I live, Lagos is where I live, but also growing up in America, and I have family members in America, I have kids in America, I have a kid in America too. So it's like, I still care about what happens on that side with everything happening with the elections, just keeping people safe. There's police brutality in America as well. You know what I'm saying? But it's more visible in America. Everything is more clearer. You know what I'm saying? You can't really just get away with stuff like that in America. Even the president of America can get into trouble in America. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the case here. So it's two different places. So it's not really anything I can compare. But you know what I'm saying? There is, political turbulence happening in both places. Yeah.
And you yourself have protested in the streets of Abuja, and you had a meeting with the Inspector General of Police. What was that experience like, and what led you to feel like you needed to get out there and be a part of this movement?
I mean, everything really just happened fast, you know what I'm saying? When I saw like the Nigerian people protesting, down to females, you know what I'm saying? Females, young people. And at first I didn't want to go because I felt like, yo, if I go, will I aggravate them and make them want to like overdo it? You know what I'm saying? But after a while I realized that, look, this isn't about me. This is about, the country. This is about my generation. It's about our future. Like everybody, I went there. I didn't go there to protest as Davido. I went there to protest as David, as a Nigerian that's worried for the future of his father's land, So just meeting with the Inspector General of Police, just showing people that, trying to explain being the bridge from the people to him, because I had access to him. You know what I'm saying? Yes, there should be protests, but there should also be dialogue as well. So, that's what we tried to do, but nothing really came out of the meeting, you know what I'm saying? So.
Do you feel like it's a responsibility as someone who has a platform like you do to try to be that bridge? I
mean, in this kind of situation, I don't think there should be a leader or somebody trying to act like they're the hero or whatever. Just be concerned, do it to be concerned as a Nigerian. I don't see it as any burden to, because I have a platform or because I have followers. I feel like it's my responsibility as a Nigerian, not my responsibility because I'm who I am,
Yeah. And so you also have mentioned in recent interviews that you're really focused on trying to help with reforms in the country.
Yeah, electoral reform, elections.
So what are you looking for? What do you hope comes next of these?
I mean,
protests?
I don't know, just better voting, man. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem. The main problem is having the wrong people in power. Why do we have the wrong people in power? It's because the wrong people are getting elected. Why are the wrong people getting elected? Because they stealing the votes. You know what I'm saying? In Nigeria, we do paper voting, paper ballot paper voting. We don't do electronic like the US and everywhere else in the world, which I think should be introduced. Those are one of the things.
Yeah.
And there should be more qualifications to be elected. Some people didn't even go to school. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah. So we're also, of course, still in the middle of a global pandemic. And back in March, your fiance came down with COVID, and you were pretty early to speak up about the virus and try to help in some relief efforts. How have things been going since then? How are you health-wise?
I'm good, man. I've done 6 tests. I'm good. I never came out positive. She never had any symptoms as well. And everybody's been good since then. You know what I'm saying? We're just trying to be safe out here in Nigeria. We're still, following the rules. Same old.
Yeah. And so finally, as a performer, as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, this has to be such an especially frustrating time for you. Your music is meant to be heard at parties and concerts. It's celebratory music. So what are you looking forward to, and when do you think people can really start enjoying?
I mean, earlier in the year, it was looking like probably next year, but I don't know. The way it's looking and the way the numbers is going up, hopefully we'll be able to get a vaccine that can reach everybody. And then like right now, I'm worried about people's safety. I'm not really worried about, getting on the road. I'm really just worried about just giving people good music you can sit in your car, listen to, sit at home, listen to. And just, I don't know, man, just for now. I mean, life is changing and I still have to do my work, which is to entertain. I can't stop entertaining,
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, Davido.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to all of today's guests and our contributors on the program. I'd also like to thank all of you, our audience, for tuning in. For more information on Time 100 Talks, past, present, and future, just check out time.com/Time100 Talks. We'll be back soon with another episode of Time 100 Talks as we convene more extraordinary leaders from every field to spotlight solutions and encourage action toward a better world. Thanks again for being with us. See you soon.